Okay, then I'm going to make you the host. It's coming
Alrighty.
your way. And then you will have, and then you'll see the waiting room once you're the host.
I think I see it. Yeah. Alrighty, I see it.
So you can let people in as they come. I wish it would make a noise when people popped in, so we know. But you could just let them in, and you can let them in whenever you're ready, and you can let them in now. And we can just wait like a couple of minutes and see who else joins us.
Alrighty, then I am going to click admit all.
Sounds good. I didn't even know there was that button to do that.
Yep.
We're all connecting. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Whose iPhone? Is that Sherry? We don't have
No, I think that may be Erica.
Erica? Okay.
Yes.
Hi. Nice to
Hi.
I don't get to see you, so nice to hear your voice.
Thank you. I'm a new member, so I seen the email come in today, and I said, "Oh, let me hop on."
Well, good. I'm glad you did. You got to join. We do this the first Tuesday of every month at 5:30 Pacific, 8:30 Eastern, and 6:30 Central.
Okay.
All right. So if you want anybody, you're more than welcome to, show your faces if you want. If you don't have to. No pressure. But we'd like to see. Hi, Allie. Yay. We like to see people's faces because it's just so much better.
I like to see who I'm talking to.
I know. We want to see. Jasmine. Let's see. S. Baker. What do you go by, S. Baker?
Oh, can you guys hear me?
Yes. Hi.
Hi, it's Simona. Let me change it real quick. I don't have a camera, or else I would turn it on.
Oh, bummer. Okay. No problem.
Let me change my name.
I know. You can change your name. So those of you who don't know, this whole Zoom thing, you can. Oh, I'm echoing. Oh, maybe I'm echoing. Anyways, you can change your name if you click on the. I think if you click on the name on your name. Let me try it on mine. Oh yeah, I can rename myself. Okay, Jamie.
There should be 3 dots near your name. You should be able to.
Thank you. Okay, yeah, there it is. Okay. There's Sherry. I knew she was on.
Hi.
Hey, how are you? Pretty face.
Good. How are you?
Good. Good to see you. Glad you joined for this advanced class on IFR beginning stuff.
Yes, definitely super advanced.
So thank you for doing this.
Yes, she's gonna do an awesome job. So okay, well, it's 5:32. We've got people popping on like crazy, so that's awesome. Dale, Simona, Dale, Jasmine, Alyssa, Mia, yay! Okay, cool. Laura, we see some new faces and we see some old faces, and that's what we'd like to see. So, again, thank you guys for joining us for the Girls Love to Fly monthly ground school session. We do our ground schools every month on something different, something fun. So, last week, I think we did it on buying an airplane. The weekend before it was like maintenance, and this week it's instrument stuff. So we're always trying to expand everybody's learning in aviation, whether it be your private pilot stuff, if you're getting your private pilot license, and we're updating you on like the latest and greatest stuff in regards to that. You could be an experienced pilot and still be learning, back to the primary stuff that you learned a long time ago and just refreshing your brain on that. Today we have Miss Sydney. She is our guest. Hi, Sydney.
Hi.
Welcome. She's our guest speaker for our IFR ground school. And it's going to be like a beginner, no matter what stage you are. It could be a refresher if you're already instrument rated, or it can be if you're getting your private and you just wanted to dabble in a little bit of instrument stuff. She's going to go over just a few things in this next hour. If you have questions during this time at all, you can interrupt, you can raise your hand, you can just yell at her. She is very sweet and nice. So Sydney is an excellent pilot. She's got a lot of training under her belt. She's recently graduated from an ATP program with like all of her ratings. She flies multi-engine aircrafts, and she's extremely intelligent. And she is one of those people that put in the work to be able to be the pilot that she is today. And I think that's great because when you're doing this kind of training, no matter if you're in an advanced, course that gives you all the material, it's ultimately going to be up to you to do your studies at home and in school so that you can have that education, because, we could all pass with a 70, right? But we don't want to only be 70% proficient when we're flying an airplane. We want to be as proficient as we can. So Sydney's a really great example of putting in her full effort to being able to know the regs, know the required things to pass these ratings. And obviously, through the years, she'll have to keep up to date with stuff because, there's so much stuff and we're always learning. If a pilot ever tells you he or she knows it all and stop learning, they're lying, because literally the best pilots out there are always telling me, Jamie, there's always something to learn. So with that being said, Sydney, I'm going to let you take over. Just go at it. And if anybody has any questions, please let us know.
Yes. Alrighty. I'm going to share my screen now. I'll bring up this. Alrighty. Let me know if you can all see it. Thumbs up. Alrighty.
Yes.
Okay. So today I wanted to talk about just a basic introduction to instrument flight and the instrument flight rules and all of that. And does anyone know what IFR stands for? Someone, anyone?
Instrument flight rules.
Yes. So instrument flight rules pretty much means, we'll move on. An instrument flight rule is pretty much flight under an instrument flight plan or an instrument rating. An instrument rating is, so I can see, all right. An instrument rating permits you to fly by instrument. In other words, you are flying without visual reference to the ground, the horizon, or other landmarks. You can't see outside, so you have to use the instruments in your cockpit, like your little steam gauges, your GPS. That's how you're flying under an instrument flight rules or with an instrument rating on an instrument flight plan. Does that make sense to everyone? Yeah, right. We're just going to move on. So privileges of an instrument rating. So instrument rating allows you to do certain things. The obvious is you can fly in clouds, and this is flight under IFR conditions or an IMC, instrument meteorological conditions. So flight through the clouds or when you can't see. Another thing that an instrument rating allows you to do is flight on an IFR flight plan. So as a private pilot, we learn about this thing known as a VFR flight plan, and this is pretty much you telling ATC, I'm going from point A to point B, just keep track of me. And an IFR flight plan is kind of the same thing. You get a clearance and you're cleared to a certain point and you have to follow a certain route. And this is what an IFR flight plan allows you to do. It allows you to fly this route.
They work. Those.
Next is a little odd one, but it allows you to do. Allie, you're unmuted.
Okay, could you help me connect?
I'm gonna keep talking.
I
So
think
another
you can mute her.
I
Yeah, you can, because I
Oh, yeah.
can't.
Here we go.
Yep.
There we go. Alrighty. Next thing we have is special VFR at night. So for those of you who don't know what special VFR is, it pretty much allows you to fly from one airport to the other under conditions that are less than your basic VFR. Does anyone know what basic VFR is? It's a number that you should know if you have a private pilot license. Just so you know what you can fly in. Anyone? I have to answer my own question. All right.
It's
ready.
3
I'll just answer.
statute miles and 1,000-foot ceilings.
Yes. Yes. So it is basic VFR or basic flight rules is 3,000 feet or 3 statute miles and 1,000 feet ceilings. So if you want to fly in conditions less than that, you need to get permission or what's known as special VFR. So, hey, the ceilings are 900 feet right now, but visibility is plus 10 statute miles. I can see the other airport, the ceilings are just too low. So special VFR pretty much allows you to fly from one airport to the other under less than VFR flight rules. So I can see the airport, I just need to be lower than I need to be. And the basic requirements you need for special VFR is going to be clear of clouds, and 1 statute mile of visibility. So you can, oh, 1 second. So with this special flight rule, you can fly that. However, there's one condition. At night, you're required to have an instrument rating in an instrument rated plane. So that's what an instrument rating will allow you to do. You can get special VFR at night. There are some other benefits to having an instrument rating or the instrument training that comes with an instrument rating. And being on an IFR flight plan makes it easier to transition through airspace if you're on a really long cross country. As we all know, we need clearances to get into Bravos and Charlies. On a flight plan, you get 1 clearance at the very beginning of your flight plan, and then you're cleared for the rest of the way through. You just need to be talking to someone at all times. There's no special clearance you need to get Bravo. And it kind of just makes things easier, because they're always paying attention to you. They're like, okay, you're here, and you're going here, and you're following what you're supposed to be doing. Another benefit to an IFR rating is one on an IFR flight plan, you can go into Class Alpha airspace. I don't think any of us are going to Class Alpha airspace in a Cessna, but if for some reason you're in a jet, you can get up to Class Alpha airspace. You need an instrument flight plan with an instrument rating. You can do that. Another good thing about having instrument training is you can back up visual approaches. So say it's really dark out, it's nighttime, there's no moon, and you're just lost in a sea of lights and you need to find the airport you're looking for. A good thing you can always do is just put in what's known as an approach into your instruments and fly a visual approach, but back it up with this instrument approach so you know where you are at all times. And if you're lined up on the approach, you know you're lined up for the correct runway. I have an instance where I was flying at night and I was going to Sacramento Executive Airport, and that airport has perpendicular runways that are kind of like a cross. And I was cleared straight in 9 miles out, and I lined up for the wrong runway. And I didn't know that until I checked my instruments, and I'm like, I lined up for the wrong runway. Let me fix that. So that's a good instance where backing up an approach to a specific runway you're landing on is beneficial. You don't need to be on an IFR flight plan to put approach into your frequency or to your instruments. They just help you know where you are. And if you have the proper training, you can follow these approaches. Another good thing is just the kind of the obvious. It allows you to fly through poor weather and visibility. So say you have your private pilot license, but it's kind of a hazy day. If you're here in California, there's a bunch of fires in the summer and it gets really smoky. Like there's no clouds, but you just can't see too far in front of you and you need to go somewhere. So that's when an instrument rating is helpful. You can travel long distances and you can just follow your basic flight rules. It helps in cases like at night, or if you're over water and there's no horizon and you don't get disoriented. They're just good things to know. And it's all great benefits when it comes to instrument rating. Are there any questions about the privileges and benefits of an instrument rating before I move on to the requirements and the regs? I want to take silence as a no.
They
Alrighty.
always, you have to twist their arms. I don't know how.
Yes.
Every week it's always silent. So you
Yes.
guys are gonna have to ask a question.
Yes. Alrighty. Next, we're going to move on to instrument rating requirements. So what are some requirements or flight time requirements you need to get an instrument rating? And we'll find this information under what's known as 14 CFR 6165. This is going to be found in your FAR aim book. It's part 61. And part 6165 pretty much says, in order to apply for an instrument rating, you need to have at least a private pilot or applying for a private pilot. You need to speak the English language, and you need to meet certain flight time. Certain flight time, if we move on to the next page, is you need 50 hours of cross-country time as a pilot in command. So PIC time in airplanes, at least 10 of those have to be in airplanes. So say you had 40 hours cross-country time in a helicopter, you just need 10 in an airplane, and you can go apply for an instrument rating. Next is 40 hours of actual or simulated instrument time, with the areas are listed in that part, Charlie. It's just like operations, but those 40 hours of actual or simulated time can differ. Simulated time can be acquired under what's known as a foggle or a hood. Those are the little devices at the bottom of the screen. And to fly with one of those on, you need what's known as a safety pilot. And this is pretty much just someone in the plane making sure you're not going to run into anything when you're wearing one of these devices. Actual time you can get when you're flying with someone who is capable of flying in instrument flight rules. So they have an IFR rating and they're the PIC, and you can actually log that if they're like a CFI. So if your CFI wants to fly through a cloud and they want to file and they want to teach you how to fly through a cloud, they can do that, and you can log actual instrument time. On top of this, you also need 15 hours of flight training with a CFI. So or CFII, my bad, which is an instrument flight instructor. So you need a special rating in order to teach someone how to get to their instrument rating. In addition to these hours, you also need to do a long cross country. And this cross country needs to be at least 250 nautical miles along airways, which are your Victor routes, so kind of like highways in the sky, or ATC directed routes. So if ATC tells you, I want you to fly direct to this airport, ignore all the airways, that counts. You need an instrument approach at each of these airports, and there needs to be 3 different kinds of approaches. So that pretty much brings it to, you need 3 airports. And the 3 different kinds of approaches can be like an ILS, a VOR, GPS. We can kind of get into what those are a little later, but they're pretty much just like ground-based or GPS-based approaches that help you get down to your airport. On top of this, we need the 3 hours of training for the check ride within the 2 calendar months. This is pretty standard for most ratings or certificates that you're going to get. I apologize, my dog was barking at my door. Any questions about the required flight time? Moving on.
Can you actually, sorry, can you go
Go
back
ahead.
to the last one? At least 3 hours of the instrument training is appropriate.
So this down here?
Yeah, the very last one.
Mhm.
so-
Go ahead.
Explain that a little bit.
So this pretty much says that you need to get 3 hours of instrument training as appropriate to the rating sought. So this means if you're trying to get an instrument rating in an airplane, you need to do these 3 hours of instrument training in an airplane with an authorized instructor for your
Okay.
check ride within the previous 2 calendar months. So you can't go practice in a helicopter for your check ride and then take the check ride in an airplane.
Okay, perfect. That's what I wanted to note was the 2 calendar months. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Anything else before moving on?
Compared to your private pilot, what's the check ride? How different is it? Is it more difficult? Is it about the same?
So I hear a lot of different things. Some people think the instrument one's a little more difficult. There's just a lot of information you need to know, and there's a lot going on. So instrument flight can get very task saturated if you get behind the plane. So a lot of people say this phrase, stay ahead of the plane. So this means prepare in advance. So if you're sitting doing nothing during an instrument flight, you're doing something wrong. You should always be either trying to get the weather, briefing an approach, just trying to plan. And during your instrument check ride, you have to do 3 approaches, and they usually put these 3 approaches back to back. So it can get pretty overwhelming if you don't stay on top of things. But as long as you're prepared, I didn't think it was that bad of a check ride, but you just have to be prepared and know what you're doing. So you can usually plan, I want to do these approaches, and they're usually fine with that. Some DPEs like certain approaches, others don't care what approaches you do.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing that you just said, just because people always think instrument is the harder one, right?
Mhm.
And it really isn't. Like I mean, it can be for some. There is a lot going on, and there's a lot of stuff you've got to know. It's a super important check ride. But even for me personally, I think the private pilot was harder than the instrument because I like the numbers and all of that. So I think it's just each individual person and how they, interpret what they're learning.
Megan always tells me that like once you've done the first one, all the other tests are so much easier, like even if they're harder, because that first one you're just so nervous, and so they just get better after the first one.
Yeah, and I mean the instrument one, I mean your life depends on all of them, right? But the instrument one is your life depends on it because you have to know how to read those charts and do those approaches because you're in the blind.
Right, right.
Yes. And you just have to follow like instrument flight is pretty much instructions. You have to be able to follow instructions, and you're required to do certain things, but those things are right in front of you. So you just have to be able to understand what's in front of you and what you're supposed to do. So as long as you can do that, you'll be fine.
Yeah, and one thing I think I want to note, and I didn't even, when I was a private pilot, people think that when you're instrument rated, you can fly through the clouds, which is the case, but you need to be on an flight plan, on an instrument flight plan to be able to, you can't just say, oh, I'm instrument rated and just go start popping through clouds without being cleared for an entire flight plan. So keep that in mind as well.
Yes. Yeah, you always need a clearance when you want to fly IFR, because they need to be able to know, okay, you're flying somewhere where you can't see in front of you. So I need to pay extra attention to you, because if I put a plane in front of you, you're not going to see said plane. So they
Are
just
there
want
also
Right.
are there also for private pilot you have to take off and land every so often within 3 months? Is there something similar to the currency for an IFR?
Yes, there is. I was going to get into that a little later, but there is currency you have to meet. So on top of the private pilot instrument, like your flight review every 2 years and your 90 days passenger takeoff and landings, there's something known as like your approach currency. I was going to cover that in like 2 slides, but it's pretty much within the past 6 calendar months. You need 6 approaches, a hold, tracking and intercepting using your navigation systems within the previous 6 months, pretty much. And if you don't have those requirements met, you are no longer current, and you have to fly with someone in order to get that currency. And if you don't fly within a certain time limit, then you have to actually fly with a CFI. Any questions before moving on? Did I answer everyone's questions there? Alrighty, we're gonna move on. So some other important regulations that relate to instrument rating is going to be under the Part 61. So I included 6157, which is going to be the recency of flight, which is what I just mentioned. It's within this past 6 months. You need the 6 approaches, holds, tracking, intercepting. And then the instrument rating requirements, which we just covered. Obviously, there are much more regulations that are in this part that are important when it comes to flying. I just picked out some of the instrument ones that are important. Knowing more regulations in this part is good to know. It can only help you. The more regs you know. These are some important instrument ones. On top of that, we also have Part 91. So Part 91 pretty much has this section in it, and it's listed under instrument flight rules. And it's pretty much parts 91 to 167 to 91 to 193. And I've listed the ones that kind of pertain to us. There's a couple others in there that are like night vision goggles. You guys aren't going to fly with night vision goggles. So I kind of just picked the ones that are kind of important to us. So 91, 167 is based on pretty much your fuel requirements for IFR conditions. Does anyone know what our VFR fuel requirements are? You should all know this, or some at least have an idea. How much fuel do we need?
You say for VFR?
Yep, for VFR. So if we were doing a day flight in VFR conditions, how much fuel are we required to have on board?
30 minutes.
30. Yes.
Yep. Yep. So to our destination airport plus 30 minutes at cruise. Does anyone know what nighttime is?
45 minutes.
Yes. So nighttime VFR is 45 minutes. IFR conditions is going to be to our destination airport, to any alternate airports that we want to have, as well as plus 45 minutes at cruise. And Jake, I asked what the VFR fuel requirements were. So that's 30 minutes per day and 45 at night. And IFR conditions are your destination airport alternate 45 minutes. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yep.
Alrighty. The next reg is 91-169, and this is the information you're required to put in your IFR flight plan. So when submitting an IFR flight plan, you're supposed to require certain information like your plane information, where you're going. This is also the reg that covers your alternates. So what are your alternate minimums? What does the weather need to be in order for you to, when you're required to put an alternate in? So just to briefly state that reg, it pretty much wants you to, if for some reason, an hour before or an hour after your ETA, flight conditions are below 2,000 foot ceilings and 3 statute miles, you are required to have an alternate. And they have some alternate requirements based on like the airport alternate approaches. If you want to look at that reg and see those, it's 91-169. I'm not going to go too much detail into that unless you guys want me to, but that just has your alternate like requirements there. I'm going to move on. 91-171 is your VOR equipment check. So if you guys know the aviate acronym, which is your inspections, your required inspections you're supposed to have for your aircraft to make it legal to fly. If you want to fly in IFR conditions, you're required to do a VOR check every 30 days to make sure these instruments are working. This is that reg. 91-173 is your ATC clearance and flight plan requirements. So in other words, if you want to fly under IFR conditions, you are required to be on an IFR flight plan and receive an ATC clearance. It is like a 3-sentence reg. It is super, super short, and it just states that. Next is 91-175. Out of all the regs that I have on this page, this is one of the regs that I recommend you know by number. So 91-175 is takeoff and landing under IFR conditions. So this pretty much is the reg that tells you at what point on the approach are you allowed to keep descending if you don't see the airport or you do see the airport. So if you can't see the airport once you reach your minimum altitude, you have to go around or go missed. And this reg defines what that point is, pretty much. And so if you can't see the airport or certain lights or approach lights or at the threshold, you have to go missed. And this also includes some takeoff minimums that can be covered. Like if you have 2 engines, 1 engine, what are your takeoff minimums, visibility requirements you need there. This is a reg that is super important, and most DPEs will test you based on the information in this reg. So knowing this reg by number is a really important one. Next, we have our 91-177, which is minimum altitudes for IFR operations. So if you're on an IFR flight plan, they like you a certain distance above the ground, depending if it's a mountainous or non-mountainous area. And this reg defines what those altitudes are. It's 1,000 feet of the highest obstacle and 4 statute miles, within 4 statute miles on non-mountainous terrain. And if you're over mountainous terrain, it's 2,000 feet above the nearest obstacle within 4 statute miles. Or yeah. The next reg is 91-179. This is cruising altitudes or flight levels. Does anyone know what our VFR cruising altitudes are? Should know these. So if we were to do a cross-country flight plan or a flight, and we were to fly the heading of 002, what altitude should we be at on a VFR flight plan? Even
4,500.
45, yeah. So it's actually going to be an odd altitude. So if you're at a heading of 002, you're on kind of like the right side of your compass. It's going to be an odd altitude, plus 500 feet. You're on plus 179 to 360 heading, then that's going to be an even altitude plus 500 feet. For IFR operations, your cruising altitude is based off the same principle, but instead of plus 500 feet, it's just straight 1,000. So every 1,000 feet. If you're between 001 and 179 degrees on their compass heading, you're going to be at an odd altitude. So 3,000, 5,000, 7,000. And on the other half, you're going to be an even, which is going to be your 6,000, 8,000, 10,000. And there's no plus 500. Next is going to be 91-181, which is the courses to be flown. This pretty much says you have to be on a Victor Airway or how what it defines what a Victor airway is, like how wide it is, what you need to do there, and like how you have to follow the route that's given to you. Next one's going to be 91-183. IFR communications pretty much says that you have to be talking to ATC. Another reg that I think is super important and that you guys should have memorized by number is going to be 91-185. I've marked those two regs with these little asterisks. So if you don't know which regs I'm talking about, your IFR operations with two-way radio communications failure. So this reg pretty much tells you what you have to do if you lose comms during IFR condition or IFR flight. And this is a really important reg, and you will be tested on this reg in your instrument check reg. So knowing this reg by number helps. Any questions about that one before continuing on to the next two regs? Nope. Okay. 91-187 is operations under IFR and controlled airspace malfunction reports. So if your instruments start breaking, your things are going wrong, you just pretty much have to tell ATC, hey, I lost my attitude indicator. Hey, my airspeed broke. You just got to tell them when things are going wrong. And then 91-189 is your category 2 and category 3 operations. So these are pretty much an instrument approach with lower minimums that require an authorization and special training. You will get this training in the airlines. This is defining what those operating rules are. You will not be able to fly these approaches without that training. So just getting your basic IFR rating in a Cessna does not permit you to fly these approaches. That's why I included it on there. So we can fly category 1 approaches. Category 2 and 3, we cannot fly. And if you actually go to an instrument approach plate, which I'll show you in a bit, it will tell you if it is a category 2 or 3, and it will say special authorization required. Any questions on regulations before moving on? I know that was a lot of word vomit and information. We all love the FARs, super wordy.
Is this really important for the written exam prior to?
So like the written exam kind of requires information. If you are doing the instrument written exam, I recommend you use Shepherd Air. It has like pretty much all the questions
Shepherd
there
Air.
for you. Yes. So if you
Okay,
just type in Shepherd's
you.
Air on your computer, it brings you to a website and it gives you a number you have to call, and you just kind of sign up with them and you sign up with the appropriate test. Fortunately, they don't have one for private pilot. You have to do like a ground school or 40s or something for your private pilot, but all the other tests and knowledge tests, there's a Shepherd Air for it. And it's really, really useful. You can ask your flight instructor about it. They should know what it is, hopefully. It makes life way easier with the knowledge tests. But this, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Any questions? Nope. All right, we'll continue. All righty. So I just kind of want to talk about what kind of happens during an IFR flight and what you kind of want to plan for an IFR flight, what's going to happen during the flight. So before we even start flying, we want to plan. And a good acronym when it comes to planning a flight is the Northwest Craft acronym. As you can see on the side, we want to know any NOTAMs about our airport. So is there any closed runways? Is there any closed taxiways? Is the approach working? Is it not working? Do they have the weather working? Next is going to be weather. What's the weather going to be like? Is there going to be icing? Is there going to be thunderstorms? Are the winds way above your minimums? These are things you got to know. So get a weather briefing, get your briefing off of ForeFlight, look at the charts, aviationweather.com. There's a lot of resources out there to get weather, and weather is something you need to know, especially on an IFR flight plan, because that's when weather gets really crazy. Next is one that kind of doesn't apply to you unless you're flying into like a really, really busy airport, and it's going to be known ATC delays. So if you're flying into like a Bravo, like San Francisco, LAX, these airports get really busy and they can get a backlog of traffic. And if there's a backlog and a delay, you're going to have to hold. And I'm going to tell you right now, I don't like holding. You can avoid holding if you can, just by being aware there's a delay here. So we might want to go at a different time of the day. Next one is going to be runway lengths and slopes. So is your runway for Jake, someone I can share the slides. I don't have an issue sharing the slides. So yeah, I can share them to Jamie and you can ask her for them. On top of, so continuing, the R is runway lengths and slopes. So if you have a runway that's too short for you to land on, you need to know the length of that runway. If you can make it, if you can't, is it super long? Is it super wide? Is it tiny and narrow? And does it have a slope? Am I going to have better performance, worse performance on it? Next is your alternates. So are the weather minimums below the certain IFR minimums that require an alternate? And what is the weather like at my alternate? What are the runway lengths at my alternate? Can I even land at my alternate? So that's information you got to know beforehand. What are your fuel requirements? How much fuel is it going to take you to get to your airport, to your alternate, and 45 minutes after? It's usually more fuel than you think you need. And then your takeoff and landing performance. So how many feet is it going to take you to take off? How many feet is it going to take you to climb over that 50-foot obstacle? Are you going to have meet the required climb performance? Some instrument flight planning requires you to do a departure, and those departures have climb gradients you need to meet, or else you're going to smack into a mountain, and no one wants to smack into a mountain. Moving on from our basic planning, we have what's known as getting our clearance. So we've run the right checklist, we've started up the plane, and now we need to get our IFR clearance. When looking at the airport, we'll find the frequency that we can get our clearance on, and we get what's known as a craft clearance. And this clearance is pretty much broken down. It's how ATC is going to give you their clearance. When they come over the frequency, they're going to say cleared to this airport or this fix via, and they're going to give you your routing, and then they're going to give you an altitude which you need to fly at. Sometimes they'll give you one altitude and they'll say expect 5,000 10 minutes after. Then you're going to get a frequency that they want you to talk to once you're up in the air. And then they're going to give you a squawk code or your transponder code. And then you're going to have to just repeat all that back. And that can be a challenging thing to learn once you start, like when you're just basic starting out, because they rattle it off at 1,000,000 miles an hour and you have to write all this information down. And it's just something that's really fun to learn when you're starting out. Another thing, before moving on, is going to be departure. So departure, after we've gotten our clearance, we've lined up, there's going to be what's known as a departure. Some airports have departures, which are your standard instrument departures, which are known as SIDs, or you're just going to have a takeoff obstacle departure procedure, which is pretty much saying, hey, there's a tree off this end of the runway, make sure you have at least this climb and don't make a turn before this altitude. Some airports just have those basic minimums. Other airports have a full chart, and I'll show you what one of those charts look like in a bit. The next phase of flight is going to be your en route phase. You have your IFR low charts, which are kind of like sectionals with less information, but kind of more information. And it just kind of gets, they look different. And when you're first learning out, it's like learning a whole new map. You need to be talking to ATC the entire time. And then there's also what's known as flight service stations. So these frequencies are kind of like a weather briefer in the sky you can talk to. So say you need an update on the weather at your airport because that thunderstorm that you were paying attention to moves a bunch. So you can talk and get a weather brief in flight by contacting a weather service station. So you're en route, get an update weather. Next, you have your arrival, which is also known as a STAR, a standard terminal arrival. And this is what you can use from en route to your approach section of flight. This is usually used by airlines. However, I have gotten a couple in a Cessna before, but they're usually used by aircrafts, but they're something you have to know because you can get one in a little Cessna or an Archer or a Cherokee. Next is the approach phase of flight. So this is when you're going to get on approach, and your approach is pretty much going to take you and get you down to your airport, following a safe path without smacking into any trees or terrain. And there's different types of approaches: precision, non-precision, precision-like. Go back. ILS, RNAV, and BOR are some of these approaches. Landing is that reg I mentioned earlier, your 91-175. Are you allowed to descend and continue to land? Do you have the runway environment in sight? And this is known as descent below DA or NDA, or your decision altitude or minimum descent altitude. And then once you're on the ground, you got to make sure you close your flight plan. If you don't close your flight plan, they're going to think you crashed within 30 minutes, and they're going to send a bunch of police and emergency vehicles out to look for you, and that's just not going to be a good day for you. So make sure you close your flight plan. If you're at a towered airport, they'll close it for you if you're on an instrument flight plan. If you're not, you'll have to call a number or try and reach ATC on the ground. If you can't, I'll give you a number. Any questions about kind of like the flight portion and what to kind of happens during IFR flight plan? If not, we'll just move on to flights and charts. Questions? No? Alrighty, we'll move on. Okay. So this mumbo jumbo of a mess. Sorry, I'm reading. Okay. So this mumbo jumbo of a map right in front of me is what's known as an IFR low and route chart. So this is kind of like our sectional or instrument flight. It kind of gets rid of a lot of the information like the terrain, because you probably can't see the terrain if you're in instrument flight rules, but it does show you what's known as Victor Airways, and it shows you some airspace, and it shows you your minimum altitudes and your airports. And there's a lot of information on these charts, and I'll kind of, and I can mess around when we're done with the slideshow, and I'll take you to ForeFlight and I can show you kind of where to find that information or what some of the information means if you guys want to, or we have time, and we can mess around with the low and route charts. I don't have an issue with that. But if there's any questions about this, there's legends. There's an IFR low and route legend. If you have the paper version, it's going to be on the paper version itself. If you have ForeFlight, you can go into your documents, FFA, legends, and there's a low and route chart legend there that helps define what some of these symbols mean.
Can you repeat that? If we have ForeFlight, what do we do?
So if you have ForeFlight and you go to your documents,
Documents.
there should be an FAA tab. You
Okay.
click that tab and you go to legends. There should be a folder with legends. There should be an IFR low and route legend, and that it pretty much has all the symbols that should be found on a low and route chart and kind of defines them all.
Okay,
So
perfect.
if you
Thank you
always
so
have
much.
questions there. Mhm.
Thank you.
And if you have a paper version, it's going to be on the paper version. Any questions about low and route charts?
Should we have like paper copies of them? Like, because I know I want to see if they're like backup, like GPS and whatnot for IFR. I could be wrong.
For
but-
your instrument check ride, most DPEs are fine with a digital version. The only check ride I've had that wanted paper versions of charts was my private. My DPE was fine with the instrument ones because it kind of makes your cockpit organized. You should know how to read these charts. You need to know how to read these charts, but most DPEs are completely fine with the digital copies.
Okay,
That
awesome.
answer your
Thank you.
question? You're welcome.
Yep.
Any other questions? All righty. And then we'll move on. We can move on to kind of what's known as like plates. They're referred to as plates. So this is pretty much information about our airport. The information on the left side of the screen, all this words, is what we can find in our chart supplement or our airport directory. And this is just information broken down that kind of has information about our airports, runways, frequencies, weather, helipads. And this diagram over here can be found in our terminal procedures publication, or it's our airport diagram on ForeFlight. And the document kind of looks like this. It's a book that has all your approaches in it, all your arrivals and departures in it, and then it has the airport diagram in it. This is the FAA version of this diagram. ForeFlight has its own airport diagram. You have Jefferson charts. They have their own airport diagram. There are just diagrams that show you and give you information about the airport. Which one you have it's up to you, whichever preference you like. They all give you the same information, just in different ways. Next, we can move on to departures. So this is what a departure plate looks like for a SID. This one is for Sacramento International Airport. There isn't one for our home airport of McAllen. This is what a departure looks like. It kind of shows you like, hey, here's our airport, fly this, then you're going to turn to here, go to this fix, and then you're going to fly one of these transitions to a certain fix, and then you continue based on your clearance, fly this altitude along this airway. This is kind of just a transition to get you off the ground, into the sky, and en route into your destination. This chart, if you have the terminal procedure publication, can be found in that booklet, or you can find it in your ForeFlight under procedures and departures. Not all airports have departures. Some airports just have your takeoff and obstacle departure procedures, which is just watch out for this tree, don't turn until you're at this altitude. This is what that departure looks like if you have a Jeppesen plate. So Jeppesen is just a brand that makes airplane plates, and I prefer them because they make it a little nicer and cleaner, but this is the same as that previous plate. See, here's the Sacktown fix, here's those different routes, and it looks the same. It's the same thing. It just looks way different. So here's the Sacktown fix, here's all your different routes. And this is a departure procedure. Does anyone have questions about departure procedures before moving on? I'm not going into too much depth since this is just supposed to be a basic, but if you want me to, I can.
I
Still
take
have
it
to
that the basic information is the same because I actually have Garmin Pilot. I don't have ForeFlight. I'm a Android person, so it basically
fine.
has the proper stuff that has all the proper coordinates and vectors as you need those.
Yes,
It looks like
yes.
it's a little bit different format, but it looks basically the same information.
It is the same information. So these are the Jeppesen plates. This right here is the government issued plate. So this is the information the government gives you. It's the same information. It tells you like, hey, be at this fix. So take off from the airport. You look right here. Take off runway 17 left and right. You need to climb on this heading to this altitude. Then you need to make a left turn direct to this fix. And you need to cross that fix at or above 2,300. So we can see here, there's our airport. We take off by the 168 heading. Once we reach 540 feet, we can turn, go to Sacktown. We need to be at or above 2,300 feet. And then here's all the transitions. All this information is on the same for every plate. This plate does the same thing. There's your heading, there's your altitude, there's your fix with the minimum altitude. So they all just look different, but it's all the same information. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Alrighty. Next, we can move on to what an arrival looks like. This is what's known as the star. Also, I want to throw in before I continue. If you, so a SID or a star, you can put into your flight plan in the mark section, no SID and no star. And they're just going to give you vectors, or they're just going to give you a point, and they're going to assume, okay, you don't want to fly this procedure. Got it. We won't give it to you. You can also decline it and be like, hey, just vector me. They might say, okay, we'll vector you, or they're like, no, fly this. This is what an arrival looks like. This is the government FAA chart for this arrival. Again, this is Sacramento International Airport. McAllen doesn't have an arrival. This is pretty much what allows like very fast, very big like airlines to get down from very high up in the sky to the approach altitudes. It's a transition pretty much from en route to approach. I've only flown a couple arrival procedures in a Cessna, and they were into Fresno because they have a low route arrival. But usually you won't get arrivals in little planes because you're just not that high up. As you can see, this approach at this fix right here is flight level 200, which is 20,000 feet. If you're at 20,000 feet in a Cessna, you're doing something right. So this is what an arrival chart looks like. This is a star. This is the Jeppesen version of the same arrival. This is the Slammer 5 RNAV. Here's the Slammer 5 RNAV. Does anyone have any questions about the arrivals?
You mentioned that you can like reject an arrival and be vectored in, is there any like situation or scenario in which you'd want to reject, or is it just based off like
So-
timing?
The only time you would really reject an arrival is if you kind of don't have the means to fly the arrival. So if you don't have the information about the arrival, so say you didn't have the plate for the Slammer 5 arrival, you can't fly the Slammer 5 because you don't know what the Slammer 5 is. So you would have to decline it, be like, I can't fly that. Normally, if you have access to your ForeFlight, you can access it pretty quickly, you can brief it. And there's nothing wrong with flying arrivals. They kind of make your transition easier if you're prepared for them. But if you don't want to fly arrivals or SIDs, you can just put in your remark sections like, hey, I don't want a SID or I don't want a star. And it helps ATC plan ahead of time. If you like decline it there when they give you the arrival, they're not going to be too happy about it. So if you warn them in advance that you don't want the star or that you don't want the SID, they're much more happy about it. You could decline it if you're unable to fly it. That makes sense?
Yep, that makes sense. Thank you.
All righty. Okay, any other questions about arrivals? Nope. All righty, we'll move on to what approaches. So these approaches are for McClellan Airport. We have a ILS or localizer to runway 16, and then we have the VOR DME 34. So these are two different types of approaches. This is an ILS precision approach, and this is a VOR non-precision approach. These kind of look the same, but what this pretty much has is what's known as a glide slope. So it gives you both vertical and lateral guidance at the airport. The non-precision VOR approach just gives you lateral guidance to the airport with step downs. So you have to be at 3,000 feet by this point. You have to be by 2,200 feet by this point. How you get there, I don't care. You just need to be at those altitudes. With the ILS, it gives you a signal, it gives you a glide slope, and you have a needle that you follow on your instruments, and you have to stay on that glide slope. And it's more so a constant descent into the airport. And that's kind of like the basic difference between two approaches. I'm not going into the details too much of how they work, but these are what your FAA plates look like. And it kind of gives you your information, shows you here's an airport, here's a horizontal view of the approach, here's the overhead view of the approach. And it gives you kind of information. So here's a fix, you need to be here at this altitude. This is Dashi, it's an initial approach fix. You need to be here at 2,200 feet, and here's your heading, you will be on. And you fly down, and here's the same thing. And this is the VOR, so you fly to the VOR, you fly that radial outbound. And here's kind of what it looks like. Jeppesen charts. When I'm flying an approach, I like to highlight things so I can find them easier. So like, here's my missed approach. So if I can't see the runway for some reason, or I don't meet the qualifications of that reg 91-175, and I can't descend, I have to go missed. And this has my missed approach instructions. And it's pretty much climb to this altitude, make a right turn, climb to this altitude, fly outbound to this VOR and hold. You can also find that here. Here's your missed approach. It's the same thing. And that's what you would have to do if you can't find the airport and you can't land and you need to go missed. You gives you instructions, follow these instructions, and you'll be fine. Is there any questions about approaches? I kind of just briefly covered them. Approaches have a lot more about them. But that's like a whole nother lesson in and of itself. Is there any questions about approaches? General questions?
Maybe able to teach us approaches at another class.
Yes, that can definitely happen at one point. They're just a whole other spectrum of instrument. Any other questions?
Yeah, it feels like a lot of like questions, but I don't want to derail you because I have a lot to cover.
You're fine. This is the last thing I have to cover. So there. Any questions?
Can you go back to that last slide?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, like can you just kind of break down more of like how you would break this down? Because I look at it and it's like, whoa, it's a lot of stuff.
Yes. So when you're first starting your instrument training, this just looks like a bunch of mumble jumble until you learn, okay, this is what this means. This is what this means.
Yeah, can you kind of break down what's like the most important here?
So this is this is a Jeppesen chart. So these are the charts I use. And when I'm in the plane, or before even the flight, I'll brief it real quickly so I know what to expect. So I start up here. So my ATIS frequency, or my AWAS, is going to be on 125.975.
Okay.
I'm going to be talking to NorCal on 127.4. And my CTAF frequency for McClellan is going to be 22 or 122.975. So how am I get weather? Who I'm going to be talking to? My final approach frequency. This is going to be my localizer frequency.
Okay.
So this is the frequency I have to put into my navigate. So this is what's going to give me my course and my guidance for the approach. So this is what's going to give me these needles that are going to lead me to the airport. So this is kind of like a VOR. It has a Morse code. See right here, it gives you the Morse code for the ILS frequency. And you would have to identify that like you would if you are identifying a VOR. This is
Okay.
telling me my final approach course. So when I'm lined up for my instrument approach, I'm going to be lined up on that heading, and I can follow that heading inbound, and it should put me right to the airport. This is going to be my final approach fix. So Wudu, it's telling me I need to cross Wudu at 1,500 feet, and that altitude is going to be 1,423 feet above the ground. So this is going to tell me what my altimeter is going to read. This is what the height is above the ground.
Okay.
This is going to be my decision altitude. So ILS decision altitude or height, and it changes. But pretty much, if I don't see the airport by 277 feet or 200 feet above the ground, I have to go missed.
Okay.
So that's my decision altitude. So it's this little arrow right here.
Okay.
And I can come down here. So straight in landing for runway 16. If I have the local altimeter setting, in other words, do I have the ATIS and the altimeter setting from McClellan, I can descend down to this altitude. If I don't have that, say for some reason the ATIS was broken and I got internationals ATIS, my descent altitude becomes higher because I'm getting the weather from this airport right here, not my airport. So it's going to be less accurate. So I can't go as low. And then it gives me minimums for the localizer. So the difference between an ILS is an ILS has a glide slope, and it gives me a glide slope down to the airport. So it gives me a constant descent rate. If for
Okay.
some reason that glide slope is broken, I have a localizer. Localizer is just like horizontal guidance. There's no glide slope, so I just have to meet certain altitude requirements. And
Okay.
there's minimums for those as well. And then here it's telling me I'm not allowed to circle the land. So say I was coming in 16, I can't circle to land 34. Some airports allow you to do that, and they'll give you minimums for that.
Okay.
I come back up here. This is just information about my airport elevation. So my airport elevation is 77 feet. My touchdown zone elevation for runway 16 is also going to be 77 feet. So that's your altitude pretty much when you reach the ground.
Okay.
This is telling me my MSA, or minimum safe altitude, around the McClellan VOR. So for some reason, I were to lose comms or I was to lose GPS, and I just needed to get off the ground to a safe height. This is telling me that around the McClellan VOR, the safe altitude to be at, if I didn't know anything, would be 3,900 feet. So for some reason, I would just lose everything. Within 25 nautical miles of the McClellan VOR, I'll be safe at that altitude.
Okay.
Because you can't see anything. You're in the clouds. You can't see the ground. You can't see any towers. So if you're at that altitude, you know you won't hit anything. That's why they include that there.
That's cool.
This right here is just telling you missed approach. So if for some reason you can't see the airport, you're going to climb to 1,200 feet and make a climbing right turn to 2,200 feet outbound via the McClellan VOR radial 344 to this point, which is Bonds, 0 DME, radar, and hold. So what this is pretty much saying is I'm going to fly out, reach my altitude, make a right turn, reach another altitude, fly outbound on this VOR radial. So the VOR is right here, McClellan VOR. Fly out 8 miles, and I'm going to hold. So it shows you right here. And then this just gives you inches. So it's telling you that the altimeter is in inches. Transition altitude, if you're in an airline, is flight level 180. Position altitude 180 or 8,000 feet. And then this is just little notes. So use the altimeter setting. If not received, use Sacramento International and DME from Sacramento or McClellan VOR, and then pilot control lighting on this frequency. So if it's night and you need the lights on, go to this frequency. What does the jet say?
That's really helpful. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for walking us through this.
And Sherry, don't think you're supposed to understand like,
No,
hey,
you're not.
it's
Well,
Well, at
just,
least I'm like, oh, okay, it's starting to make sense instead of like, what is that?
yeah, no, you're good. But this
Yeah,
stuff
no,
will
it's
make
really
sense as
good.
well once you get to this point. It's really cool. So it's if you're not understanding all of it right now, you shouldn't. Not after the first,
No, it took me several times and several flights under instrument flight to even understand how to read this plate. And I just rambled off so much
It was
information.
great. Thank you, Sydney.
Yeah.
No, that was all
Yeah.
good stuff. Really, it was very clear. But I'm just telling the girls, you know what? You'll be just fine.
Yes.
One step at a time.
Yes.
Because it does take a long time to understand. You don't even know what an ILS is or a localizer,
No,
but
I didn't understand. I had heard that term so many times in my private, but once I didn't understand what an ILS or an RNAV meant until I got into instrument flight and I was actually using them.
yeah, exactly.
They're just a bunch of letters slapped together to form an acronym. Is there any other questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask your opinion on whether it's better to do your instrument in a glass cockpit or round dial. It's kind of an ongoing battle with some
So,
CFIs.
well, okay, I'm a little biased. I got my private in a 6-pack, and I got my instrument in a glass, and then everything else, all my CFI instruments, all that I did in a 6-pack. I can do them in both. It's really a personal preference. A glass cockpit has more information and it's all kind of right there and makes it a little easier. But at the same time, if you can fly an instrument approach on a 6-pack, you can fly anything else pretty much.
Yeah,
because
and I
it's-
agree with you. I agree with you because I learned on a G1000 182 with a glass cockpit, and I thought I was so cool, right? And that's where I got my instrument rating. But when I started flying King Airs and they had the round dials, I literally was like, I can't read this stuff. I don't know what it is. And as a more advanced pilot, it was extremely hard for me. So I felt like I had to go backwards. And like Cindy said, in the glass cockpit, you can't go, there's nothing better. There's so much information. It's so precise. It's so awesome. But if you have an opportunity to learn both, it would not be a bad thing to do, because some of those bigger aircrafts, you think that they're glass cockpit, they're not. So you may have to know it depending on what you're going to be flying next.
Yeah. If you can fly a 6-pack instrument flight, you can pretty much fly any other. It just gets easier once you learn the glass cockpit. Once you know where everything is, that information transfers. So because the 6-packs, you have to. Biggest thing I noticed about flying between a 6-pack and a glass cockpit is it automatically puts in your wing correction. With a 6-pack, you have to put in the wing correction. With the glass cockpit, you can just follow the little arrow and your wing correction's there. That's the biggest difference I noticed. So if you can do the wing correction on your own, you can definitely follow a little arrow.
Well, Sydney, we're gonna have you come back for more. You were awesome.
Alrighty.
Thank you so much for donating your time to the
You're
girls.
welcome.
Love to fly.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate it. You were
You're
really
welcome.
good. Very
Mhm.
helpful.
Thank you, Sydney.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Sydney.
Thank
I will
you.
give Jamie these slides so you can bug her for the
Yeah,
slides.
you got me.
Yeah, can you
All
send them
right.
to us?
Happy flying to everyone. Thanks again, Sydney, and everybody. Have a
You're
great.
welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, Jamie, can you send those to us?
You got it.
Thank you.
You're
Have a
welcome. No
great night,
problem.
everybody.
All right. Okay.
Bye.
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 Okay, what do you want for dinner?